Hi, I'm Hayley Kay for Blackpool Grand Theatre's gVlog. And in case you didn't know, the Grand Theatre has launched its very own production company and their debut show is happening this summer. It's Around the World in 80s Days. Now, I'm very excited to be joined by the writer and director, Ian McFarlane. So, Ian, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And I just want to start by asking, where do you even start with something that's brand new? So it's never been done before. This is completely new. Where do you start?
Normally, I would say the story. I've done lots of new work before, and especially lots of new comedy, specifically rather lots of new comedy. I would say with the story. With this, it was a combination of the story and the music. So, in terms of the story, it's been adapted so many times in so many various forms that my job was to sort of devour as much of that as possible. I mean, I must have watched 25 different versions of Around the World in 80 Days, because you've got to figure out what the common denominators are, what people are going to expect. And they expect an adventure story with a balloon that goes around the world in 80, because all the different adaptations, the beginning and the end are the same, but they take a lot of liberties in the middle.
Okay.
So people generally only know that Victorian chap, Phileas Fogg, accepts the bet to go around the world in 80 days. He has an adventure, falls in love, then he wins the bet and comes back to London. So it was figuring out which bits do our audience expect and what are they going to want to see, and which bits can I go my own direction with. And then musically, it was cataloguing the 80s music. You know, I just, again, had to just eat, sleep and breathe it for a month or so. Before I could even begin sort of picking which songs were going to go where, I needed to sort of know the 80s music inside out. And I was pretty good with my 80s music anyway.
Yeah.
And so it started from there, from just sort of mapping out where the story was going and then creating a catalogue of the songs in sort of different categories and where they might go.
Because that was sort of my next question. You're working with an established brand like the Grand. So how do you sort of get into sort of keeping all that on track in terms of what it is and the direction it's going?
Well, I mean, I grew up coming to the Grand. The Grand was my local theatre in a way. I grew up in Preston, and we would come to the Grand a few times a year. So I've got a good idea of the history of the place anyway. But when I got this job, I did spend a lot of time researching what made the identity, I suppose, of the theatre and what its historical identity was. So, you know, and Blackpool and the identity of Blackpool. So, you know, variety theatre and live music is very much part of Blackpool's fabric, and it's really the only town, I think, in the country that you can come to and there's live music. There's live music somewhere every single night. I mean, all year round. It's amazing. And then, you know, in the summer, everything completely goes to the roof and it comes alive. And so it's trying to pick threads from those traditions, like the music hall and the sort of the vaudeville, the stand-up, the sort of end of the pier shows, and the live music, and taking those threads and seeing where we can weave those in so that they're buried in a way that you might not necessarily go, oh, that's that and that's that and that's that. But yeah, there is a sense of sort of love letter to Blackpool, because there's a bit of a sort of vaudevillian variety sense to the show.
Okay, well, nobody expects everything to be plain sailing, if excuse the pun, but what have been sort of in your career your biggest sort of challenges, and what challenges do you think you're going to sort of face with this type of a show?
Comedy is hard. Comedy's hard, and it's funny because everybody is funny, no pun intended. Everybody will think that because it's comedy and it's funny, that actually you're just having a great time all the time doing it. And of course you are. Comedy's really, really fun.
But that's the skill, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, really tricky. Drama is so much easier. And if you're writing a drama, then you start with a scene and you need to know who the characters are, where they are at the beginning of the scene, where they're going to be at the end, and what the journey is. And you can sit down, start writing, and sometimes not lift your hands up from the keyboard until you've done a whole scene, and then you go back and hone that. Comedy is different because if you are having gags and jokes, which ideally you will when it's a comedy, ideally, they're not always just free flowing. The rhythm of a joke has to be planned. So you sort of sit down to write, And you might get a page in, and then you're going, well, okay, well, we've got to have a gag every 3 lines, but there's this really important part of the plot. We've got to get to there. So if I move the gag there, the beginning bit's quite tortuous, first world problems and all, but it's hard, but it's really satisfying when it works. After you've done that first draft, the first draft is hard work, and then when you've done that first draft and it's all starting to come together, and then you can hone it. That's really exciting. But then also once you get into rehearsals as well, it's so much harder doing comedy than drama, because you're always just telling the story as an actor. You're telling the story and you're trying to portray the character in the most real, honest way possible. But with comedy, there's that technical aspect, as you know, that you've got to be thinking about how you land the line and what the rhythm of the joke is. So there's the 2 sides of your brain all the time. And with this, it's brand new, so nobody's done it before. So there's no blueprint. So when we were auditioning, I'd only written a quarter, maybe 2/4 of the show. No, a quarter of the show, and all the actors had was the audition material that was sent to them. But it's not like they can say, "Oh, I'll watch the film version of that," because it's not going to be like your normal adaptation of Around the World in 80 Days. And there are adaptations that are funny, of course. Comedy is the story is often adapted with a lot of comedy, but that's really tricky, because they're coming in having to create it fresh, which is really exciting though, because these actors that you'll see in this production are creating these roles. I'm tailoring it to them in rehearsals. They might do something absolutely wonderful where we say, well, that's even better. That came from you. Let's use that and let's hone that. And seeing something in its first incarnation is really exciting, because you are, without sounding too sort of flowery and directory, you're seeing the people that birthed it in the room. So that's really exciting. And on top of that, they are running around changing costumes every 35 seconds. Cause
really?
It's when I was saying before about that sort of vaudevillian music hall sensibility, they're playing lots of different characters in a very short space of time. So you get somebody running on with a coat on one way, and then they turn around, they're a completely different character, and then there's a mustache and a hat. That's sort of classic comedy sketch style, and I mean that's exhausting. They're going to work very hard.
I was about to say, it sounds exhausting.
But it's got the reason it's exhausting is, well, it's exhausting because they're running around, obviously, but it's got to be so drilled and precise that it just looks like it's just plain sailing. From the audience's perspective, we've got to make it look easy.
Okay, well, you've got this cast that you're working with. How do you sort of give them constructive feedback without sort of extinguishing
passive-aggressive notes on
Brilliant.
their mirrors?
Brilliant.
Yeah. Be better, stick. No. Gosh, that's a really difficult question to answer. But you just, as a director, everybody's got to trust you, and they've got to trust that you are going to keep them safe, and that nobody wants to jump from a great height without a safety net. And at the beginning of rehearsals, you're asking everybody to go on this adventure with you, especially since, again, it's brand new, and you're saying, I know that you don't quite know where we're going. Every new piece of choreography, every new piece of staging that we're doing in the room, they've never seen before. So they've not auditioned for the show knowing what the show's going to be. It's not like going and auditioning for a show that's been running 10 years. You go, oh, I know what that is.
Well, because I think that's, sorry to interrupt, but I think that's the fascination, that the only person who kind of knows what this is going to be like is you, because it's in your head. Yeah. So that's no pressure. Yeah, right. But, and what about the team around you then? Who sort of, what roles do they sort of play around you? Because it's a big ask, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we've got a brilliant team of people. I mean, the theatre, the in-house staff at the theatre who are part of the sort of management team are great. It's the first in-house production, 125 years, and it's the first in-house production. It's so exciting, and so there's a real buzz from the whole building. Everybody's really excited about being involved in it. So we're really well supported from a management perspective. Then we have a brilliant production manager. He is in charge of the set and the big heavy stuff you've got to put together, and lights and things. That's his realm. And we've got great people working in costume. The design of the show it's got a Victorian aesthetic, but it's not stuffy stuff like starch collared Victorian. It's Victorian with a bit of an 80s twist. Yeah. So you've got Phil Fogg in his suit with his frock coat with Converse on, for example, and ladies with Victorian dresses but with Rubik's Cube necklaces and sort of peculiar little touches. Steampunk, if that means anything to you, which maybe not, is a similar sort of style. So it's sort of Victorian through the lens of the 80s.
But I just think it sounds fascinating, like you say, because Victorian, the era and the costume is quite set in people's minds, but then so is the 80s. So to fuse those two together,
they work oddly very well together. But the 80s, you've got the big the puff sleeves and the blouses and sort of cinched in waist, and that's quite Victorian. You know, everybody that's done Amdram will know that, well, in a certain era, my era of Amdram, 2 years ago when I was 20, you'd be sent on stage in an 80s bridesmaid dress pretending it was Victoria, you know, in a school play.
Yes.
It's a Victorian dress. It's not. It's an 80s bridesmaid dress. But you know, there are some similarities, and we don't want it to be stuffy. It's the world of the show. It's not real Victorian. It's like cartoon Victorian. You know, it's like when you watch a Disney movie and it's set in a certain period. You know, they take quite a lot of liberties with it. It's a fantasy version of that period. So it's like that with this.
Well, you might have answered the question. Why do you think people should come and see the show then?
Fun. I mean, it's just going to be so much fun, and I think in the world that we live in, we need some escapism. We need to go out for a few hours and just laugh. And I think if you know the 80s songs, you're going to have a great time because you're going to recognise the songs. But because it's not a concert and it's not just a tribute show, because there's a story and there are characters, if you don't know any of the 80s music, we've used them in a way that they're integral to the plot, so you will just watch it like any other new musicals. I think you're going to go out with a huge grin on your face, and hopefully you are going to absolutely have laughed your socks off. I want people to have aching stomachs from laughing so much, and just joy, I think.
Brilliant. Oh, well, Ian, thank you so much
for
joining us today. And you can get preview tickets for just £10 on our website. Head over to blackpoolgrand.co.uk or call into the box office on Church Street or phone them on 01253 290 190. I've been Hayley Kay for gVlog.